Speaking of how Jover it is for Rishi, let's listen to him being interviewed by local radio presenters yesterday. Clearly, not learning from the failures of Liz Truss when after the mini budget she went onto local radio stations and came out looking, I think, the worst I've ever seen a Prime Minister look after interviews. Let's have a watch.
On your watch, the Conservatives have lost control of the councils in Windsor and Maidenhead, West Berkshire, Bracknell. You're no longer running Wokingham. These are councils that have been Conservative for as long as anyone can remember. If you can't win here, you've had it, haven't you?
Look, midterm, whether it's by-elections, local elections, always tricky for incumbent government.
Would you be tempted to catch the train if we had a HS2 line in place?
And you see what I mean about they're losing councils in traditionally Tory areas. That's how you know it's Jover. That's how you know that there's just like no hope for them coming back. Once you've lost Windsor and Maidenhead, like what are you doing as a Tory? What are you doing as a Tory if you're losing Windsor and Maidenhead? I mean, come on. Maidenhead is Theresa May's seat, for Christ's sake.
I mean, look, I said I would be catching the train on Saturday if there weren't strikes, but unfortunately
you caught a jet when you arrived in the Northwest in January this year. You got on a jet plane.
Yeah, I take lots of different forms of travel to get around, mainly because it means I can squeeze more into my day.
Now, the Mayor of Flitwick has said...
True, he just needs his private jet, unlike you, Proles, because he's just such a busy man.
And it's widely understood that Nadine Dorries in the Mid-Beds area has not provided a surgery since March 2020. Many constituents claim that they haven't seen her since the end of the pandemic, and her office in Shefford, it's now a dance studio. This is hugely embarrassing, hasn't it been?
What I'd say to the people of Mid-Beds is, I want them to have a fantastic MP going forward, right? And in Festus Akinbusoye, who lots of people will already know because he's the Police and Crime Commissioner, they've got someone who is going to be absolutely on the side of local people. He's going to work with them to get things done. He's got a brilliant...
I mean, come on. You could have chosen anyone with a normal name, couldn't you, Tories? Right? You could have chosen anybody with a normal name, but no, you decided to go with someone called Festus. Uncle Festus, no less, for your parliamentary candidate for Mid-Bedfordshire. Like, I'm sorry, they don't help themselves, do they? They can get, this is your fault, right? You could have instructed and forced Nadine Dorries to resign. You could have rescinded the whip so it looked like you were serious about her failure to actually be there and representing her constituents. But no, you tried to triangulate around it. She didn't want to screw over and piss off the membership and the Boris Johnson clique by looking to attack one of the inner ring. But of course, that's more important to you, the internal party manoeuvring, than the citizens of Mid-Bedfordshire. And quite frankly, they deserve to lose in that constituency, given the actions of Nadine Dorries alone, let alone the overall national picture on what the Conservatives have been doing on the country.
Brilliant record tackling rural crime. We'll put more police officers on the street. And he's also going to be on people's side when it comes to protecting the Greenbelt.
You lost North Shropshire. Your party lost North Shropshire in 2021 to the Liberal Democrats, a seat held by the Conservatives for centuries. Indeed, it had never been any other colour. How do you win back rural voters who think you're not doing enough for them?
I think midterm by-elections are always difficult for incumbent governments, the first thing to say. But I think first and foremost, actually, for people everywhere, I think the priorities are clear, that they're the right ones that I set out. Many people, I mean, my constituency being a great example.
Yes,
Many
the
people from North Yorkshire do work
the A64 is in North Yorkshire, which is where you live. And a lot of the time, I know you've invested in the North Yorkshire coast, but a lot of the time, you can't even get there. How can the North Yorkshire coast, reach its full potential when you can't even get there?
True, exactly. Like, all of our transport sector is just completely screwed up. There's not enough public transport, so everyone goes into their cars. And so because everyone's driving, it clogs up the roads. It's all downwind of the fact that we just don't build any infrastructure in this country whatsoever.
Well, I know that what's going on with the A64, I know it is frustrating, and the reason that there are road closures on the A64...
Do you use the A64? Have you been on the A64 and driven in there yourself?
No, he's taken his private jet to the eastern coast, hasn't he?
I use lots of roads across the entire
But the
country all the time.
A64?
But yeah, of course I've been on the A64. I mean, that's how I live in Northallerton.
Can I just ask you though?
Yeah, his chauffeur took him down the A64. He knows exactly what it's like.
The way that this whole thing has been carried out, the way that she's behaved, it literally goes against everything that you stand for, doesn't it?
No, I'm not focused on the past. I'm focused on the future.
Why?
I think
Because
that's what
don't
the
people
of
deserve
Mid-Beds-
better in mid-beds? Don't we deserve better than we've had?
Yeah, and that's why they should vote for Festus, because I think he's brilliant. I think he'll be a great MP for people. He's completely local. He's already cut rural crime. He's going to protect people's green spaces. He's just a fantastic guy. He's going to be a great champion for the local area.
I love how, and like in one of them, they're going, well, actually, there's a really big issue with the fact that our traffic sector is completely screwed over by lack of investment in new infrastructure. And on the other side, he's going, oh, well, I'm going to protect your green spaces on this different sector of society. Although it does, what I will say is that Rishi Sunak definitely sounds a lot more animated and engaged than Keir Starmer does.
I think what people are going to do is Festus isn't responsible for Nadine Dorries' behaviour. Festus is his own person.
No, you are, and
he's
you're her
working his
direct
socks
line
off.
boss. So why didn't you deal with that situation? I think that's what we're struggling to understand.
Sorry, I feel
which
just
is
like
really-
we're going off topic here, and I just want to keep it focused on HS2 because you haven't. We're straight talking people in the north. It's a yes or a no. Are you scrapping the HS2 line between Birmingham and Manchester?
No, like I said, I'm not speculating on future things. We've got spades in the ground right now, and we're getting.
Yeah, literally, the previous one, I'm not focused on the past, and later says, let's not speculate on the future. He does sound disingenuous constantly because he is disingenuous. He's a political careerist. That's what he's here for, right? Why would somebody who had just had dreams of making the country a better place give up their job as being a banker for Goldman Sachs to then get into politics other than to do it for political careerists and disingenuous means? Like, but pull the other leg, it's got bells on.
Hang on, but what
But is it
people
under
also
review?
want to know. Government is always making sure that we get value for money out of everything we do, but that's just a statement of the obvious, right? But I think
You're literally ripping copper out of the walls. It's so true.
what people also should know, because I know there's a lot of focus on this one thing, but actually, what are the journeys that people use most in Greater Manchester or across the north? It's in their cars right now, getting to work, taking their kids to school, making sure that the roads are free of potholes. That's probably priority number
We're not
one that
talking
people
about
raise with me.
potholes. The main story right now across the country is people want to know about the future of HS2, and still now you can't give me a yes or a no, and you're the man in control. You have the keys.
No longer politicians.
It's credible, right? They say, well, let's ignore HS2 being closed down. Most people, they travel by the road. Yeah, they have to travel by the road because you've built no bloody trains. Because there's not enough public transport infrastructure. So everyone has to go in their cars to be able to make up for the fact that you've reverse-induced demand on the rail network. So you've pushed people into their cars. Oh, well, we can't do HS2, let's ignore HS2 now because most people actually use their cars. Yeah, they have to use their cars because they've got no choice.
Taking the easy way out, but making the right long-term decisions for the future. I did that by charting a new course for net zero, more realistic, more proportionate, more sensible, that's going to save families thousands of pounds in costs and still get us to net zero. I was honest about that. Didn't take the easy way out. I got a lot of flack for it, but that's the kind of approach to leadership that I'm going to bring, and that's how we're going to change things for the better.
Alok Shah, the Reading West MP, who is the president of COP26, reacts to that decision by saying he won't stand for your party at the next election.
Those two things are...
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? He did indeed quit or say he wouldn't stand at the next election just recently. I'm assuming it's probably in some way to do with the fact that he is very pro-climate action, and Rishi Sunak's clearly swerved away from that, given his climb down on commitments on that one. I didn't even realise it. I just thought, he's not standing, he's just clearly thinking the ship is sinking. Maybe it's more ideological than that. Maybe he is literally revolting because he feels like the Conservatives are going to come like the climate denier party or the climate inaction party, maybe.
Absolutely not linked, and actually I saw Alok yesterday, as it turns out, and he remains a good friend and a good colleague of mine.
Birmingham City Council is broke. Now you're going to say it's down to mismanagement. They say that from 2010 they've been fighting with Tory cuts. So what people in Birmingham want to know is why should they have to pay for this? In their council tax, in their rent, or with their jobs?
It's incredibly disappointing that they've mismanaged the council to such an extent that now there are quite serious interventions that are required.
So why should people...
I mean, to be fair, there is an issue with Birmingham City Council because, of course, they actually genuinely failed on a bunch of equality stuff that meant they got sued into oblivion. But that doesn't, however, take away from the fact that, you know, you look at Thurrock and other councils that have issued Section 114 notices that have essentially cut back on all non-essential services because of how broke they are, because of the fact that they haven't got enough central funding from government, from Westminster. We talked before on stream where even the councils that are technically solvent are only solvent because they've had to sell off £15 billion worth of locally owned assets since 2010 to be able to continually pay for routine expected council duties. And they're going to run out of those things to sell off eventually, right? That's the problem with neoliberalism. You eventually run out of public sector assets to sell off. That's the position that these councils are in. So there's going to be more. There's going to be more council bankruptcies coming soon. Just you wait, chat. There'll be plenty of them coming down the road once they run out of assets to sell off. Again, point this out again. These are your assets, chat. These are, you viewers at home, these are things that you own. These are things your local council owned, being sold off to private equity firms because the government is stripping their funding to try and ensure that the private sector be able to eat these things up, right? Like the absolute terrivores that they are. Absolutely revolting.
In Birmingham pay for the council's financial mess then?
Well, it's now for what needs to happen is locally these things need to get resolved. I think people rightly in Birmingham will hold the Labour-run council to account. They should do, right? The council has massively mismanaged its finances. That's wrong, right? And I'm sure people are frustrated and angry about that. I would be too. And the government's been engaging regularly with the council in recent months over its pressures, repeatedly expressed concern over its governance arrangements. But ultimately, you know, the whole point about local councils that they are devolved. They manage their own finances.
I'm going to start in Richmond.
The finances come not just from council tax, which is in some ways constrained by central policy from Westminster, and on top of that, they get local authority funding from Westminster that's been massively cut back since 2010.
This morning in your constituency. I just want to play you a little clip of a lady called Mel Wise who's trying to raise £18,000 to give pupils at Leyburn Primary School access to better computers. If you wouldn't mind, just take a listen to this.
We are trying to raise £18,000 to cover the new computers for the school. These are very backdated, the 12-year-old. We're having sleepless nights, putting events on, family fun days, cake bakes. Should we really be having to do all this to supply the children with up-to-date technology?
Prime Minister.
Yeah, maybe we should stop forcing schools to have bake sales and family fun day events that they have to put on at their own expense to raise money for computers so that kids can have an education. And maybe we should force the military to have bake sales. Maybe Michelle Mone can have a bake sale to fund her PPE and her yacht. Maybe we should have a family fun day to fund Liz Truss's private jet trips over to Australia. Maybe that might be a better use of our time, rather than stripping back funding from our schools, which are collapsing, by the way, because of failure for capital investment to repair our schools, viewers at home. But no, of course, they've had all of their funding stripped away from 13 years of ruinous austerity.
The Conservatives have been in power for 13 years now, and we were just wondering why schools are struggling to provide this kind of basic equipment for pupils.
Well, look, Amy, first of all, thanks very much for having me. I care passionately about our children's education. I think probably one of the most important things I can do is make sure that we...
You literally cut the capital investment fund down so that from 400 schools being retrofitted to deal with autoclaved concrete, down to 50 schools being retrofitted for autoclaved concrete. If every decision you've ever taken shows the complete opposite of the point that you're making there, Rishi. It was literally your fault that the number of schools that were due to be retrofitted was reduced from 400 to 50. You did that. I hope this presenter brings it up.
We have a world-class education system because to set our kids up for the future. I view that as pretty much my most important job, quite frankly. The point is, we can talk about the past, but I think most people we focus on the future.
Well, let's talk about the future with Festus
then,
because we haven't heard from him. We have contacted his office several times. We have not heard from him. Is it because that everybody's just embarrassed about what's happened in Mid-Beds?
I mean, that is definitely not right. I mean, Festus is working his socks off.
The thing is, though, Mr. Sunak, that people here in Greater Manchester can't forget this. Another leaked bit of information from a video in Tunbridge Wells in a garden party last year.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas.
Literally playing it to his face is incredible. Oh my God. Thank you, Anna Jameson, and everyone in Radio Manchester.
Then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
Well, you don't care about deprived urban areas, do you?
No, I absolutely do, but I think it is completely wrong to say that those are the only places that are deprived in our country. The point I was making...
Yeah, what other than what Royal Tunbridge Wells, Rishi? Literally in Royal Tunbridge Wells, of all places, saying, well, we diverted the money away from deprived urban areas to here. I set about the work of undoing that. Come on, Rishi, come on. I'm so hard up in Royal Tunbridge Wells, really and truly.
You said Tunbridge Wells, but I was actually speaking to people across the south coast, and there are coastal communities, particularly in the south, that are deprived, and that is the case across our country. And when I say I want to...
Yeah, and guess what? Like, you literally were like throwing migrant boats into like small deprived working class communities on the south coast. And you never wanted to have any of the migrants in your constituency, did you, Rishi? No. Did you have them in Westminster? No, you didn't have them there either. Were they indeed in Royal Tunbridge Wells? Of course they weren't. Of course they weren't. Sure, we have to deal with our own share of the refugee and migrant crisis. We absolutely do. But it is clear political opportunism and a lack of care for the actual real lived experiences of working class people in this country that you will deliberately make sure that the burden is entirely put upon the poorest areas of this country rather than putting these people fairly shared around. But of course you won't do that in Conservative voting constituencies because then they might get sad.
To deliver a levelling up, I don't want to pit one region against another. The point I'm trying to make is that we need to level up everywhere, and that goes equally if you're in an urban area in the north as you are in a coastal or rural community in the southeast or the southwest. And actually, if someone disagrees with that, that's fine, but I think they're completely and utterly wrong. I want to spread opportunity everywhere, and it is the point I was making is that applies equally to someone living in a difficult situation in a coastal community in the southeast as it does.
He's literally levelled up nowhere. Again, I mean, by levelled up, did he not mean levelled? Right, he's levelled loads of places when they start collapsing because of all of the concrete.
Urban area in the north.
Not
and
in
actually,
the
I think
garden
most
party
people
in Tunbridge Wells. Mr. Sunak, we'll have to leave it there because you've got our colleagues to speak to. Thank you very much for your time.
Local radio, never change. Never change local radio. That was beautiful. Yeah, if Starmer bungles this, he's literally like the worst leader of the opposition ever. Like, you cannot lose against this. You cannot lose against it. This is worse than Theresa May. Surely this is worse than Theresa May.